Starting with number 2, we are solving and graphing the equation. Now, in an absolute value equation, what we look for is, think of what two numbers would have an absolute value of 14. Now, absolute value is the distance a number is from 0. So what two numbers will have an absolute value of 14, or a distance of 14? That would be 14 and negative 14. So we write two equations, right? What's on the inside of the absolute value equaling negative 14, and 7t equals 14. So now we solve. Divide both sides by 7, you get t equals negative 2. Divide the second equation by 7, you get t is negative 2. So your answer is negative 2 and 2. Now it says to use a comma to separate the answers. So type in negative 2, comma 2. Okay, now to graph it, it says it's not an inequality, it's an equation, and it says t equals negative 2 and 2. So you're just going to have 2 points, one on negative 2 and the other on 2. So your answer is going to be B. It's not going to be A because your answers aren't any of the numbers between them, just negative 2 and 2. So you're going to choose B for number 2. Number 3, we are solving and graphing the absolute value inequality. So let's take a closer look at that. So when we have an absolute value inequality, and it's a greater than inequality, it's going to be a disjunction or statement. So you'll write two separate inequalities. The first one would be both of these changed. So this will become a less than and equal to, and this will become a negative 6. So drop the absolute value bar and have x plus 3 is less than or equal to negative 6. The second equation will be or x plus 3 is greater than or equal to 6. The absolute value bar is gone. Now we solve both of these equations. Subtract 3 on both sides. You'll get x is less than or equal to negative 9. Subtract 3 from both sides on the second one. You'll get x is greater than or equal to 3. So we have x is less than or equal to negative 9, or x is greater than or equal to 3. So let's graph it. So looking at our choices, we'll choose A. Now for our graph, it would be either C or D, going two separate directions, and since they're both equal to inequalities, it will be closed in circles, which they are, but then we have at negative 9 and 3, so at negative 9 and 3 would be D. So you'll choose D for number 3. Number 10, we are solving the absolute value equation. So your goal should be to first get the absolute value term by itself. We see this 6 is keeping it from being by itself, so move to 6. So we subtract 6 from both sides, and we'll get absolute value of 8n minus 3 equals negative 2. Now let's think of this for a minute. Absolute value is the distance something is from 0. Now we know we cannot have a negative distance, so that's telling me my absolute value here is a negative number, which cannot happen, so my answer for number 10 would be no solution. Number 11, solve the equation. So again, we got to get the absolute value by itself first. So we add 7 to both sides, take care of this before we take care of the multiplying. So add 7 to both sides, we get absolute value of 4y minus 6 times 3 equals 15. Now, to get this absolute value by itself, we need to move this 3. Now, we cannot distribute in absolute value. We got to undo the operation, so we would divide. Remember, do not distribute the 3 in. So we divide both sides by 3. So that would leave me with absolute value of 4y minus 6 equals 5. Now we can write two equations because 5 is positive, so we're able to solve it. Now, what two numbers have an absolute value of 5? That will be 5 and negative 5. So write your two equations. You'll have 4y minus 6 equals negative 5, and 4y minus 6 equals 5. Remember two things. One, when you do this, when you write your two equations, the absolute value bar is gone. Second thing is, do not even think about adding 6 and dividing 4, before writing your two equations. You got to write the two equations first. So now we're going to solve the first equation by adding 6 on both sides. So we'll have 4y plus 1, divide both sides by 4, and y equals 1/4. Second equation, add 6 to both sides, you'll get 4y equals 11, divide both sides by 4, and y equals 11/4. So my answer is going to be y equals 1/4, and y equals 11/4. Number 12, solve and graph the inequality. Since this is an absolute value inequality, we look at the inequality. Since this is a less than, it means we will need to rewrite it as a conjunction, not a disjunction. Less than means conjunction, so write it as -5 is less than x is less than 5. So basically, rewrite this without the absolute value, and then add -5 is less than that is less than 5. And then if there were more than just an x inside, you would solve it. But otherwise, that would be it. That would be the answer. So now let's graph it. Now be careful. You might get confused and choose A. Make sure there's no line under it here, so there's no line under it here. So it would be D, not A. And for the graph, it'll be open circles by the interval, the conjunction, so that would be C. And that's the answer for number 12. Number 18. Starting from 100 feet away, your friend skates towards you and then passes you. She skates at a constant speed of 20 feet per second. Her distance d from you in feet after t seconds is given by d equals the absolute value of 100 minus 20t. At what times is she 20 feet from you? So much of the work is already done for us. They turn our information into an absolute value equation. And distance, what time is she 20 feet? 20 will go in place of d. So now we're going to solve that absolute value equation. Write it as two separate equations without the absolute value bar. Write it as 100 minus 20t is equal to -20, and 100 minus 20t is 20, because the two numbers that have an absolute value of 20 is 20 and -20. So now let's solve them. So subtract 100 from both sides, and we'll have -20t equals -120. Divide both sides by -20, we'll have t equals 6. Okay, now for the second equation, again, subtract the 100. You have -20t equals -80. Divide both sides by -20, and t equals 4. So my answers are going to be 6 and 4. Number 19. The recommended daily intake, RDI, of a nutritional supplement for a certain age group is 1,100 milligrams a day. Actually, supplement needs vary person to person. Write an absolute value inequality to express the RDI plus or minus 150 milligrams and solve it. Now, when we have plus or minusing an amount from it, it means it's going to be an interval range. It's going to be a conjunction, because you're going to either have 150 more or less in either direction. That tells me it could either be A, C, or D. Now, you have x minusing something or something minusing x in each one. Now, we're told that the recommended amount to ingest each day is 1,100. If x is the actual amount we intake, that means that minus what's recommended is what's going to be inside the absolute value, because that's what's going to be compared to the 150 in terms of being plus or minus that 150. And that means our choice is going to be A for that reason. Now we solve it. So it's a conjunction because it's a less than. So write it as -150 is less than or equal to x minus 1,100 is less than or equal to 150. So what we actually intake can only vary between 150 and -150. So add 1,100 to both sides. We'll get 950 is less than or equal to x, which is less than or equal to 1,200. So this here is going to be the answer. It's going to be in between. What we actually intake is going to be between 950 and 1,250. So typing it in, I'm going to choose A first. And then I'll put 950 and 1,250. That's the answer for number 19. Number 21, it says solve the equation and then check the solutions. This one's slightly different because we have an absolute value equation equaling something with a variable in it. So what two numbers have an absolute value of 4x? That would be negative 4x and 4x. So writing my two equations, I'll have x plus 15 equals negative 4x and x plus 15 equals 4x. To solve the first equation, I subtract x from both sides and I'll get 15 equals negative 5x. Divide both sides by negative 5, I'll have x equals negative 3. For my second equation, I subtract x from both sides. I'll have 15 equals 3x. Divide both sides by 3, and I'll have x is equaling 5. Now we got to check our answers, because when we have the absolute value equaling something with a variable, we could have what's called an extraneous solution, meaning it's an answer for x, but it isn't a solution to the equation. So let's try them both and see which works. So first we're going to substitute in negative 3 for x. So doing that, we have negative 3 plus 15 in absolute value, and on the other side of the equal sign, 4 times negative 3. So negative 3 plus 15 is 12. 4 times negative 3 is negative 12. Now the absolute value of 12 is 12, equaling negative 12, which is not true. 12 does not equal negative 12, so that means x equals negative 3 cannot be one of our solutions because it doesn't work. Let's go ahead and try 5. Substitute in 5 for x. We'll have 5 plus 15, which is 20, and 4 times 5, which is 20. The absolute value of 20 is 20, so 20 equals 20, which is true, so that means my answer, and my only answer for number 21, is 5. So typing it in, we see 5 is our only answer for number 21.